Hello there. My name is Captain Jeff. I do this podcast called the Airline Pilot Guy Show. And you're watching the video of me recording my audio podcast. Head over to airlinepilotguy.com, take a look around and see what you can find out there. You can see previous episodes of the show. Or, of course, you can just look on the YouTube channel, Airline Pilot Guy. But there's so much more at the actual website, Airline Pilot Guy. You can find out about the coffee fund and a little bit more detail about my biography. I think it's called About Me or whatever, etc. And if you want the full show notes for today's show, again, airlinepilotguy.com/140 should take you there. Sit back and relax and enjoy the show. Airline Pilot Guy, episode 140.
Flight 209, you are cleared for takeoff. Roger. LA departure 123.9. Roger.
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, the view from my side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 1A in the APG headquarters building in an Atlanta suburb. In this episode, declaring an emergency, an Ebola update, a Skywest flight with control problems, lots of your feedback, including main gear bogies, type ratings, and scary flight experiences. So get all settled in. Tray tables and seatbacks in their upright and locked positions, electronic devices powered on. Flight 140 is ready for pushback. Hello and welcome to this week's episode. How's everybody been doing? I've had a fantastic week. A lot has transpired. I've experienced a lot of great experiences since our last episode. Let's see, what shall we start with? Well, let's see, on Saturday, we had an Atlanta meetup, and for those of you listening right now who are living in and about or around the Atlanta area, we're sorry we missed you if you weren't able to come and join us at the DeKalb Peachtree Airport, or I usually call it Peachtree DeKalb, but I guess the technical name is DeKalb Peachtree Airport, and we went to the 57th Fighter Group restaurant, which is located right there, right on the airport, right next to one of the runways, and had a fantastic time. On Saturday afternoon, Ray Williams, my neighbor to the north, picked me up in his car and drove me down to the 57th Fighter Group. And there we were joined by Dave McLeese, also known as Super Dave MC, Tom Brodell, Acme dispatcher Tom Dugan, and I think that was it. Ray, Dave, Tom, and me. Yeah. So the five of us had a grand time. We were on the patio outside overlooking the airport and parked right there. I'll try to remember to throw some pictures in. If you're following me on Facebook, and that's facebook.com/airlinepilotguy, check it out because there you'll see some of the pictures that I took of a Wacko, a bright yellow, beautiful Wacko biplane. And anyway, yeah, we had a great time. Talked aviation. Ray brought an old Jane's, not a manual, Jane's, what do they call that thing? Jane's, that book that has all the world's aircraft in it, Jane's something. I just can't think of what it is right now. But anyway, from 1945, 1946, something like that, in excellent condition. We had a blast looking through that. And yeah, but the best part was just kind of hanging out with fellow aviation enthusiasts, part of the APG community. We had a grand time. So if I'm in your neck of the woods one of these days, perhaps we can have a meetup there. And speaking of that, on, let's see, so I was off basically Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, which was really nice. And then left again on another 3-day trip, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And when I was in Miami, actually I had 2 Miami layovers, but the first one on Monday, Nick Acosta kind of coordinated a meetup in the Miami area, and we met at the Filling Station Garage Bar located right smack downtown Miami, and I, again, had a great time. Nick met me there, and his father-in-law joined us, Francisco. And Rick, the guy that gives us a lot of audio feedback here, he's a cargo pilot and based in Miami. And it was just such a great time meeting Nick and Francisco and Rick. And again, we had a great time talking aviation and such. And both Nick and Rick had great minds think alike. They both went to, let me find this, hang on. To the airplane shop. I guess they have locations in Miami and Las Vegas and somewhere else. I thought I saw that on the cover, but apparently not. Well, anyway, they have a few locations here and there, and Fairfield, New Jersey, that's the other one. And this is a place where you can buy aviation toys, models, and collectibles. And I know if you're listening to the audio podcast, you can't see this, but Rick flies, again, for a cargo carrier, cargo outfit. And he gave me this 777 freighter, which is really, really cool. And Rick, you didn't tell me I had to actually put it together. It was hard. No, not really. And we have this Acme MD90 diecast model, a little bit smaller than that 777, in models and real life. Anyway, what a great thing. You guys don't have to give me anything when you come and meet up. It's just show up. That's, the main thing. But anyway, so that's really cool. I can kind of play with my airplane during the breaks, right? Okay, so thank you, Nick and Rick, again, for showing up and sharing a couple beers with me and some pub grub at the filling station and garage bar in Miami. Hope to do it again sometime soon. So there you have it. Oh, and then let's see, on Monday, was it Monday? Was it Monday or no, it was Tuesday morning. We were flying. No, I take that back. I'm sorry, I'm so confused. On Monday morning, my first flight of the 3-day trip, we flew from Atlanta to LaGuardia and had a jump seater. He came in and introduced himself and asked if he could ride my jump seat. And I said, most certainly. And I don't know how I think, we said, do you live here? You going to work? What's the deal? And he says, well, actually, I fly for the outfit called Geico Skytypers. And I immediately recognized the Geico Skytypers because Xena sent in some feedback about the, what did they call it? Wings and Waves air show in Daytona Beach about a little over a week and a half ago. And I remember seeing these Skytypers spelling out Embry-Riddle, wings and waves in the air. And I'm thinking, I know what that is. And he said, yeah, we just finished this past weekend an air show in Rome, Georgia, which is not too far from here. And actually, I was thinking about going to that, and I completely forgot about it. So they flew up there as well. And he is the lead solo. His name is Steve Salmers. And again, of the Geico Skytypers, and he's also an airline pilot for, I believe, American Airlines. Yeah, American Airlines. So he sat on the jump seat, and we talked, geeked out on all kinds of aviation stuff. They fly T6s, the old T6 trainers, and they're outfitted with the smoke and everything else. And he explained the way that the whole system worked, and they basically fly abreast about 150 feet apart, and some computer controls and synchronizes the puffs of smoke so that they, instead of doing the sky riding, like the continuous riding that you probably are aware of some of the sky riders doing, they actually, because they're riding, I think, 6 abreast, 150 feet apart, and then the puffs of smoke come out, and it's like typewriting. So in the sky. So anyway, that was a lot of fun meeting Steve. So Steve, if you're listening to the show, hello. And again, nice to meet you, and hope to see you again sometime soon. Okay, so yeah, I did this 3-day trip, had the Miami layover, and Miami meetup on Monday. Tuesday, I recovered, and then Wednesday, finally home. Had a little interesting weather. In fact, if you follow me on Where is Captain Jeff? That's WHEREISCAPTJEFF. That's where I kind of have that connected with my Foursquare Swarm or whatever they're calling it now app that kind of gets my location, and I kind of broadcast that, and I put a little snapshot of our very interesting route of flight on yesterday morning. If you're living in the United States and you recall the storm system that has gone across the United States again, it's October. What's going on here? We're supposed to have nice, stable weather this time of year. But anyway, more, thunderstorm kind of activity, and it was kind of hanging out, kind of stalled up there to the south of the New York area and off of the Atlantic Ocean, which is kind of inhibiting flights from Florida. And so we were just about to leave the gate yesterday morning when we received word that they were on a ground stop. And then one of the agents came down and said they're going to put more fuel on the airplane and going to get you out of here as soon as possible. And I said, well, we're on a ground stop. How can that be? And so I talked with the dispatcher, and he said, yeah, we received a new routing from air traffic control. And he said, head over and get your full route clearance. And so we did that. And normally when you fly from Miami or Fort Lauderdale up to the New York area, initially you normally use the AR routes over water, over the Atlantic Ocean, from South Florida all the way up to usually the Wilmington, North Carolina area. That's basically where you start following the eastern seaboard up. And sometimes you'll actually hug the Florida coast instead of going out over the AR routes in case there is weather over the AR routes. But this clearance was really interesting because we went from Miami to basically the Tampa Bay area, and then up the Gulf Coast and around that Big Bend, Cross City, and then past Tallahassee, up toward Georgia, Columbus, Georgia, basically, well, actually a little bit east of that, over Atlanta, and then up through Tennessee, over Knoxville, Tennessee. We kept on going, basically due north into Kentucky, over Lexington, Kentucky, just east of Cincinnati, Ohio, continuing all the way up to Lake Erie, just south of Cleveland. Yes, Cleveland, Ohio. And we continued along into northwestern Pennsylvania, into southern New York State in the Finger Lakes region, then back through Pennsylvania, and finally into New York's Kennedy Airport. And so normally that flight that we had originally planned was going to take us 2 hours and 15 minutes. Well, our new flight yesterday morning took us 3 hours and 38 minutes. But at least we got those passengers up there. Yes, a little bit more than an hour late, but I think it would have been worse if we had waited for the ground stop to sort itself out and gone the normal routing. So anyway, I've never seen anything like that before. I'll try to remember to put a shot of that in the show notes so you can see the crazy flight path that we took to avoid that little bit of weather just south of Long Island, which I think was, I don't know, may have been kind of unnecessary. But anyway, that was not the company's idea. That was the FAA's idea of how to get up there. So we did it, and the rest is history. So there we go. All right. Let's do some Java Jive by the Ink Spots, recorded in 1940. Let's talk about the Coffee Fund.
I love coffee, I love tea, I love the Java.
Okay, so the Coffee Fund. Why is there such a thing? Well, this podcast is free to you, free to consume as much as you want. But it's not free for me, so I do have costs associated: website hosting, media server hosting, etc. Lots of other costs that I really don't want to go into. But that's okay. I'm doing this out of a labor of love. But many of you have decided that, you know what? I got some extra cash hanging around, and I want to help you out with that. And so if you want to help the Airline Pilot Guy show out monetarily, you can contribute to my coffee. Oh, also, I love coffee. And as I like to say, coffee is my favorite method of caffeine consumption. And and I literally do use money from the coffee fund to buy my caffeine-laden coffee. So, since the last show, looks like Billy, BAS, Stuart, and Leonardo used the classic method for contributing to the coffee fund, and a new patron over at patreon.com, Kieran O'Leary. So, Kieran, Billy, BAS, Stuart, and Leonardo, thank you so much for your contributions, and to everybody who has made a very generous donation in the past. I do appreciate it, and thank you very much. If you want to learn more about the Airline Pilot Guy Coffee Fund, head over to airlinepilotguy.com/coffee. Oops, Mr. Moto, I'm a coffee pot. All right, enough of that. It is now time for the news. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention that if you do contribute to my coffee fund, I just want you to know, I think I have to tell you that it is not tax deductible. I am not a nonprofit 501(c) corporation, sadly. And that means that anything that you contribute to me, as far as I know, you might want to check with your tax attorney, is not deductible. And in fact, I just got a message from Patreon today that they needed my information for a W-9 because I think that's what it's called, some kind of a form, basically, so they can report my earnings to the IRS. And so everything that you give me is taxed at my regular rate. So sadly, I don't get the full force of your contribution. The Uncle Sam takes quite a nice cut, and I'm happy to give it to him. Go, Uncle Sam. Okay. Let's start with this. I was looking through some stuff, as I am wont to do, because I'm always looking for interesting things to talk about on the show. Hopefully interesting. Something caught me eye. An article entitled, "Would You Hesitate to Declare an Emergency?" And I'm thinking, this should be good. Let me check this out. This is from General Aviation News. And let me read a little bit of it. "The fact that all three of my passengers were throwing up simultaneously left me three options: tough it out and press on to our destination, join them in their nauseous state, or declare an emergency and get the heck on the ground. My right seat passenger was a Horizon First officer. She thought she was used to bumpy rides. I was flying her to her domicile. She was supposed to report for work there within 4 hours of our scheduled arrival time. To top it off, it was only the 11th month of her 12-month probation period. Missing her showtime could be reason enough to fire her. I wanted to press on. Believe me, I wanted to impress her with my weather flying skills in hard IMC. I wanted to be her hero, but mostly I wanted her to walk my resume in to her chief pilot the next time a hiring window opened. Everything in me said, continue. Even my front seatmate pleaded for me to gut it out. So I hesitated. But here's the thing. It's a strange reality to be at 8,000 feet and your soundtrack becomes the steady thrum of twin Comanche motors and propellers counterpointing the unsteady gasping and retching of your passengers. When my own stomach began to roil, I knew I had to throw all thoughts of heroism out, or heroism. There we go, Jeff. I reluctantly chose to declare an emergency and divert to the nearest airport. Quote, Center, Twin Comanche 300 Romeo Echo is declaring an emergency. I have multiple vomiters on board, and I need clearance down to 2,200 feet immediately and vectors to KCEC for the ILS runway 11 approach. Without waiting, I initiated an emergency descent and made the turn myself. I'd already pressed the nearest button on the Garmin 430, so I knew which direction to head in. ATC didn't like that move. I could hear the audible distress signal of a near miss in the background when they exhorted me to stop my turn and descent. After minutes that passed like seconds, we taxied up to the FBO. A crowd surged onto the rainy ramp. ATC, of course, had passed on the nature of our emergency. People had gathered as intrigued by what might emerge from the plane as they were afraid. My passengers deplaned as best they could, each looking like a pile of clothes just out of the spin cycle. Okay, so it goes on, and he says, it sucked to end the trip by declaring an emergency, but it was the smart play. Had I hesitated much longer, I might have become as incapacitated as my passengers. That would have been a disaster. For many pilots, it's common practice not to declare an emergency, even though doing so would get them the priority attention they need. Why is that? Perhaps for some pilots, it's the misapprehension that the ramifications of declaring an emergency include extensive paperwork and probable violation. Legally, pilots may have to file a written report of an emergency in the event of a deviation from a federal regulation. However, according to the FAA, they will not face an FAA violation if their actions are in the interest of safety. Finally, the FAA supports the pilot's ability and judgment to act in this manner. Despite that, some pilots are loath to draw undue attention to themselves. And I agree with that. Perhaps it's human nature to try to avoid embarrassing ourselves. You might think that declaring an emergency is akin to announcing that you have lost control of the situation. The truth is, it's exactly the opposite. You haven't lost control. You are taking control of the situation. You are delegating responsibility by commanding the full attention of everyone who can get you down safely. In the business world, that's called leadership. In a recent Aviation Safety Reporting System report, also called a NASA report, a pilot noted his engine quit in flight. He managed to find a good landing spot, a closed airport sporting a big X on its runway. He told ATC of his engine trouble and then switched over to 121.5 to make a Mayday announcement before landing on the runway. Someone monitoring 121.5 suggested that he declare an emergency before he landed there. Only then did he. In filing the NASA report, the pilot mentioned that it seemed more natural for him to make the Mayday call than it was for him to formally declare an emergency due to an engine failure. Think about that. Declaring an emergency allows ATC to give you first priority handling to expedite a safe landing attempt. Mayday is used to signal a life-threatening situation. Mayday is the call of last resort. Declaring an emergency is a step well before that. As one crusty old CFI told me, quote, announcing Mayday is telling everyone where to find your wreckage. Declaring an emergency is done to avoid becoming the wreckage. Okay, so he goes on, and so that was the bulk of this this article. Now, again, I don't want to be too critical of this because I think the whole point of this is definitely important, and I agree with the writer that don't be so reluctant to declare an emergency when the situation is appropriate. And again, you get that emergency handling, that priority handling that you wouldn't wouldn't necessarily if you did not declare an emergency. Now, one of the things I have a problem with here is, and I wasn't there, so I can't determine based on this article whether or not, starting an emergency descent and turning without permission from air traffic control was absolutely critical for the safety of flight. I understand you have people throwing up and you're kind of starting to feel queasy yourself. And you could have made matters worse, and you probably did, or it could have been a much worse outcome had you been involved in a mid-air collision, because the thing that when you do an emergency descent, it is important to get the airplane down rapidly if it's because of a loss of pressurization, because that is critical, that you get into the lower air, the more oxygen-rich air, so that people don't pass out, especially the people at the control of the airplane, or controls of the airplane. But in this case, I'm not so sure. Again, I'm not going to be too critical here. I wasn't there, but that one kind of seems iffy to me, that making that turn and descent in this particular situation. The other thing that I want to make sure that people understand is that unless I have a misunderstanding of this, and I did do some research on this, and from what I could tell, it backs up what I've always thought. Mayday and emergency are not two separate things. Mayday, mayday, mayday is the verbiage you sometimes use, and I think in the United States you don't hear it as much as you do in other parts of the world, but that is declaring an emergency. Mayday, mayday, mayday is stating I'm declaring an emergency. Now in the U.S., and also I'd like to add, I have declared many emergencies in my career so far, a flying career, but I've never uttered the words mayday, mayday, mayday. And I kind of agree that mayday is for a circumstance that's a little bit more urgent and severe than maybe just your run-of-the-mill emergency declarations. However, I want to make sure that people understand, because I kind of got from the gist of this article that the author was trying to make a distinction between mayday, mayday, mayday and an emergency declaration, and they are the same. They really are. It's just that here in the U.S., you don't hardly hear anybody use the term mayday, mayday, mayday. It's usually, again, unless it's one of those situations like the Alaska 261, I believe, that was having controllability problems over the Pacific Ocean, and they basically ended up losing complete control of their pitch and rolled inverted and crashed into the ocean. And in that case, they said mayday, 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 because they knew their situation was very, very dire. But again, you don't hear that a lot here in the United States. I'm not sure why, but every time that I've been in a situation that I wanted to have priority handling, I did declare an emergency by saying I'm declaring an emergency, but I've never said mayday, mayday, mayday. But again, I don't think that they're necessarily separate things. Okay. And so again, I like the fact that this was published, because I hope that it causes pilots out there to rethink, whether or not they should or should not declare an emergency, and how I feel about pilots in command not exercising their command. And I think it's essential for safety that we do. And so again, if it's a situation where you need that priority handling, you should not hesitate to declare an emergency. And it's, in general, just a little bit of paperwork you have to fill out. And if you've done everything correctly, you don't have to worry about it. Again, it's a protection. So what else do I want to say about that? That's about it. So again, I'm not piling on here. I just want to make sure that people understand that, the difference between, if there is one, mayday, 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 and emergency, and to consider what kind of a situation you have before you just on your own start doing things like descending and turning, etc., unless it's really a life-threatening situation. All right, probably more time spent on that than I wanted to. Let's talk about, this is from Mike from San Diego. An ill air traveler fuels Ebola hysteria. The article goes on, this is from the Houston Chronicle, with hundreds of millions of people taking to the skies each year, sitting side by side in cramped planes, there are few places where the public is more on edge about catching something, anything, be it a harmless cold or a vicious virus. But whatever happened Thursday night, last week, aboard an American Airlines trip from Dallas-Fort Worth to Chicago, Flight 2325 seemed to represent a microcosm of emotions surrounding Ebola, which in recent weeks has incited fear and paranoia throughout this country. A University of Texas professor who was on the flight said she was outraged by what she contends was a sick passenger who was told by flight attendants worried about Ebola that she would have to stay in the lavatory for the duration of the flight. She was making her way to the bathroom and vomited in the aisle. Martha Selby, head of the Austin University's Asian Studies Department, recalled the passenger who sat a few rows ahead of her. The flight attendants, I think, overreacted completely. It was just crazy. But American Airlines counters that the crew was not even considering Ebola, but merely acting to take care of a sick passenger. According to American Airlines spokeswoman Michelle Moore, there were no concerns related to Ebola. Our crew saw a very sick woman that probably had food poisoning or something. She was so sick that she had asked to remain in the lavatory for the duration of the flight. Okay, so a couple different, explanations or whatever regarding this. According to American Airlines, the crew says that this lady wanted to stay in the lavatory for the rest of the flight, and the passenger said that no, they basically locked her into the bathroom. So let's see what's new with Ebola this past week since the last episode. We talked about some of those airports that are have been designated as special Ebola screening airports, and just recently the government has said that anybody coming into the United States from any of those countries in Africa that are experiencing the outbreak must come in through one of these 5 gateway cities. Let me see, just off the top of my head: Chicago, Atlanta, Newark, Kennedy, and Boston, I think, are the ones that they've designated as the gateways. And so that differs a little bit. They had these things set up at these airports, but there wasn't a requirement that anybody with a passport from Liberia or Sierra Leone, et cetera, must come into the United States through these ports of entry. But now they must. So they're trying to restrict that a little bit. Not an outright ban, but they are hoping to catch people that are exhibiting signs of the virus at these places. And then the other thing that I was just reading prior to starting the recording, and I'm recording today, the 23rd of October. By the way, it's my wedding anniversary. I should have mentioned that at the beginning. Thursday, the October 23rd, 2014. And let me see if I can find the article that I was looking at. No, of course I can't. But apparently there is a possibility that a new patient has the virus in New York City. Apparently he was a 33-year-old doctor who recently returned, or he is a 33-year-old doctor who recently returned from the disease-racked West African country of Guinea, rushed to the hospital today to Bellevue with symptoms of the deadly disease. And then according to this guy, he says that he self-quarantined himself, but there are some reports that yesterday he was seen at a bowling alley in Williamsburg. So I don't know what's happening with that. So hopefully we don't have another case of the virus and then contact with others. And, it doesn't take much to get one of these things to become a full-blown outbreak. So that is all I have basically in the news regarding Ebola since our last episode, which is good. And then finally, I was looking at one of my favorite websites to see what's happening with incidents and accidents and that kind of thing, and that's the Aviation Herald, avherald.com. And I saw this. I thought, well, this is interesting. A Skywest CRJ200 flight 5290 operating just a couple of days ago, Tuesday, October 21st, was flying from Asheville, North Carolina to Chicago O'Hare with 44 passengers and 3 crew, was on approach to Chicago O'Hare Airport, west of the airport, when the crew declared an emergency, reporting that they had kind of lost their flight controls and were able to perform only left-hand turns and had difficulty maintaining altitude. I have a little bit of the, I went into liveatc.net, another great site. You can hear air traffic control, pilot communications, and nobody had extracted this audio yet, so I had to go through and tried to find the archived audio as best as possible. And for those of you who are not aware of liveatc.net, this, and some people, by the way, have written to me and said, hey, why is it that it's so hard to understand these communications? And is it hard for you all to, you pilots, to understand what's going on? Well, the communications that we have in the airplane, the radios that we have, are set to a specific frequency, and the air traffic controller is also on that same frequency. And the audio quality is very high, and there's usually not a problem understanding the communications unless you happen to be in an area of precipitation static, but that very rarely happens. So usually the communications are very clear. Now, liveatc.net is a network of volunteers out there who, using their own time, their own money, set up these scanners and tie them into the liveatc monitoring network. And there are hundreds, maybe even thousands of them out there, but they're using scanners, VHF scanners, to get the communications. And a lot of times, these scanners are set up to monitor several different frequencies. So you're not just getting one frequency at a time, but it's actually pulling in audio, and whatever the strongest signal is what's going to dominate the conversation at that point. And because many of these airports, especially airports like Chicago O'Hare, Atlanta Hartsfield Jackson, New York LaGuardia and Kennedy, et cetera, have so many different frequencies that not all of them are covered. And so just wanted to, and by the way, I need to have the founder, the president, the chief honcho from liveatc.net on the show sometime, so we can talk a little bit more about this great service that he's providing. But anyway, so I went to the liveatc.net archive and put in the Zulu time and tried to find the right channel, the right recording, to see if we could get some of the audio from Skywest 5290 so we could play it for you on the show. And I did find some right about the point where they declared an emergency and were having trouble with their flight controls. And then at a certain point, I don't know what happened. It just, I didn't hear anything from them anymore. I'd hoped to get some of the audio of them basically not going to O'Hare, but instead landing at DuPage Airport. And so let's listen, before we continue the Aviation Herald article, let's listen to some of this audio I was able to find. And as always, I edited it. I took a lot of stuff out so it wasn't so long. And so it's compressed in time, et cetera, et cetera. So let's have a listen.
Center, and just going to maintain 6,000.
Center maintain 6,000 and 10 center, Skywest 5290.
United 1030, turn right 270.
270, United 1030.
United 1030, go direct to Georgia, rejoin the arrival.
Georgia, rejoin the arrival, United 1030.
Skywest 5290, what's the nature of the emergency?
Flight control issues, Skywest 5290.
Very good. Can you hold 210 till advised?
We'll do our best, Skywest 5290, but it'll be hard.
6,000 okay for right now.
6,000 is fine for now, Skywest 5290.
Do you have the airport in sight?
Airport's in sight, Skywest 5290.
Skywest 5290, can you accept a 10-mile final?
Yes, sir. 10-mile final will be fine, Skywest 5290.
Very good. Skywest 5290, maintain 6,000 for departures, please. 6,000 for 290.
Maintain 6,000, Skywest 5290.
Yeah, stay at 6. 90, just going to maintain 4,000.
Center maintain 4,000, Skywest 5290.
Skywest 5290, are navigating direct Georgia on the arrival, or do you need a vector?
We'd like vectors, Skywest 5290.
Very good. Turn left at 270.
Left 270, Skywest 5290.
Skywest 5290, real quick. Souls on board and fuel. Skywest 5290, go ahead.
47 souls on board and 4,000 pounds fuel. 4 miles. Are we okay at 5,000?
I gave you 4. Do you prefer 5?
4 would be fine. Skywest 290.
Very good. 4,000 and speed of discretion. I assume you're going to slow?
Yeah, we'll be slow in Skywest 290.
Okay, can I pin you down to a speed of 180 or less? Skywest 290, turn right 360, maintain 3,000.
Right heading 360, 3,000, Skywest 290.
Press up runway 10 center localizer.
Alright, 06010 center localizer, Skywest 290.
Skywest 290, with visual approach, runway 10 center.
We can't turn right, Skywest 290.
Can't turn right, huh? Okay. You can't turn right at all. With 5290, maintain 2,000 if you would. What can you do?
We can hold this heading right now, Skywest 290.
Okay, maintain 2,000, hold that heading, let me know when you're ready to turn in. You're going through the 10 center localizer.
Heading is 2,000 for now, Skywest 290.
Skywest 5290, Roger. Maintain 2,000 is fine.
Okay, that was it. And I wasn't able to find, and I went through and listened to several different feeds to see if I could pick up some more of that conversation and what happened. But if you know of any of that audio out there, my dear listeners, please, send me an email with that. That would be great to hear the rest of the story. But basically, I'll continue reading from the Aviation Herald website. So we talked about the fact that, and we heard them say they could not turn right, they could only turn left, and they were having difficulty maintaining altitude. Chicago TRACON and all approach controllers stopped all descents towards Chicago at their present altitudes, providing a minimum separation of 2,000 feet for the CRJ200 at about 2,000 feet mean sea level. The CRJ200 performed a left-hand turn towards Chicago DuPage Airport, which is to the southwest of Chicago O'Hare, and where the aircraft landed safely at a high speed, 230 knots over the ground, on runway 20 left, still in contact with Chicago TRACON. DuPage Emergency Services inquiring with Tower about the status of the aircraft were told Tower was still not talking to the emergency aircraft after the aircraft had landed. A short time later, the crew switched to Tower frequency and advised again they had kind of lost their flight controls and performed a flaps up landing. Emergency services reported there were no signs of fire, smoke, heat, or any leaks. After the brakes had cooled down a bit, the aircraft taxied to the apron where the passengers disembarked. The passengers were bussed later to O'Hare Airport. And then the last part of the article here, the airline confirmed a mechanical problem. And it's interesting to see their path on flightaware.com, another great website, where it showed the track of the flight. Basically, they were getting vectored for the 10 center approach at O'Hare, and then kind of rolled out on that north heading, and then they couldn't turn right anymore after that, and then they made a big sweeping left-hand turn, and then rolled out, basically heading due south, and they landed at DuPage. So looking at some of the comments on Aviation Herald, some were thinking, well, I wonder if this is some kind of a fuel imbalance problem. And no, I can tell you right now, it's not a fuel imbalance problem. Somebody said that they were told by an insider that maintenance found 2 wires shorting inside of the yoke that controlled the HSTA. I don't know what the HSTA is. Either the story got mixed up between the incident and the reports, or there was a miscommunication between me and my insider. Somebody else speculated that they were using their speed brakes during the descent, and upon retraction, for some reason, the left-hand flight spoilers were not fully retracted. Again, he says just a speculation. So there are a lot of speculation out there what exactly was going on, why their flight controls weren't acting the way they were supposed to. And sadly, unless the FAA and the NTSB do a formal investigation and report on this, we're probably never going to know unless somebody listening here, knows somebody that knows somebody, and kind of lets us know what the internal investigation is regarding what the mechanical difficulty was in this case. But sadly, we're probably never going to know. But the good news is that this Skywest crew performed, a great job safely getting the airplane on the ground. Yeah, it didn't get on the ground exactly where the passengers had hoped to land, but at least they got awfully close, and they're still alive. So hats off to that Skywest crew for getting that airplane safely on the ground. So that is it for today's news segment. Let's move on with your feedback.
Captain, incoming message.
Okie doke. Let's see. Bruce sent me some feedback in episode 138, 2 episodes ago. And just to recap, he said we need, he's referring to automation and specifically to the tragic crash of Air France 447. And it was Bruce's idea that we need an interpreter, a mediator between man and machine. Would the Airbus tragedy in the Atlantic have happened if a computerized voice had said, quote, disregard speed indicators, pitot tube blockage likely, and disconnect autopilot and autothrottles, maintain 3-degree pitch, and 65% N1. In my opinion, this would not be difficult to achieve, as we already have this type of capability in a car sat-nav system where we must keep our eyes on the road and are directed by a voice. And then, so I basically said, well, that seems to me like it's part of automation, and I'm not sure that if the automation wasn't working to begin with, then would this system necessarily work, etc. So Bruce wrote back and said, my suggestion is regarding a separate computer program aboard the plane that taps into all flight data while it is being recorded on the flight data recorder. Think of it as an extra pair of eyes in the cockpit, filling the role performed by flight engineers in the past. It would not be part of the automation. In fact, I envision that in most cases, it would advise the pilot in control to fly the plane manually. For example, let's take a look at the Asiana crash that was so chillingly caught on camera. This system could extrapolate from the distance to the runway and the glide slope angle combined with the speed whether an airplane is outside safety parameters. It would then announce something like, quote, glide slope and speed incompatible with runway. Resume manual control, or conflicting autopilot modes. This flight engineer would monitor all the systems, not just the automation. It could detect when there is something physically wrong with the plane. Remember, it would be copying all the data that goes to the black box, that data that is read and processed over the gravestones of passengers and those pilots that asked, what is it doing now? When this information is at its most useful, that is when we need it. And then he says, why does it not exist already? I hear everybody cry. There are various reasons that I can see. Number one, aircraft instrumentation is highly specialized and not conducive to seeing the whole picture. Number two, manufacturers of instruments have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo and producing the next generation of their devices. Number three, there are legal implications for vocally advising pilots on a course of action outside an individual instrument manufacturer's narrow field of expertise. That's probably a big one there, I agree. And number four, the continuing blinkered march toward removing errors from flying by increasing automation. The impetus to produce this system would need to come from aviation safety authorities such as the NTSB and the FAA. To be effective, this computer would need to be compulsory and impossible to switch off, just like the FDR. It would need to be tested in simulators by using the data from past air crashes to see if pilots receive adequate warning to regain manual control. The Airbus Flight 447 that you commented upon was an interesting case where the problem started with blocked pitot tubes and not the autopilot. It was the pilots that flew their plane into the Atlantic through sheer panic combined with dual inputs from both side sticks. The autopilot did what it was designed to do. It switched itself off. It had no authority to continue flying the plane without adequate information. It was also beyond its capability to advise the pilots to just leave the controls where they were until the pitot tubes became unblocked. I sincerely believe that in many cases, a system like this would not only give a pilot extra seconds, but also extra minutes to avert disaster. As it stands now, when a flight gets into difficulties, pilots are bombarded with alarms, klaxons, stick shakers, and the panicky whoop, whoop, pull up, usually at the last minute, increasing their task saturation. This system would warn them before it gets to that stage. To work well, the system would need to allow the pilots in command to time to sort out any problem for themselves and only intervene with a vocal suggestion when the plane is leaving the realm of safe flight. So it would reduce workload, and on standard flights, the pilots would receive no advice, being totally unaware that the whole flight had been monitored closely. There is another major advantage with the system. In hierarchical societies, many first officers have been afraid to speak out when the captain was unaware of a problem. I'm sure, Captain Jeff, that you remember some of those tragic cases that ended with disaster. This flight engineer would not be afraid to speak up. I'm not saying that the software for the system could be quickly developed. It would need huge input from aeronautical engineers and TSB investigators, and most importantly from pilots such as you, Captain Jeff. In fact, I would like to hear the calm, dulcet tones of your own voice as the voice for this device. I don't know if I want to be doing that. If there are any software engineers on my wavelength, maybe they can develop a prototype program to show the viability of this idea. So I put this out to all listeners in the APG community. For example, I know that many flight simulator enthusiasts listen to the show and have programming ability. The software development kit that comes with Flight Simulator 2004 would be an excellent platform to test this idea. And again, that was Bruce writing in. And Bruce, yeah, you know what? Maybe there's some validity to this kind of a system. I don't know. It seems quite complex, and I do see a lot of problems, many of which you voiced yourself in your email. By the way, a couple years ago, 2-3 years ago, I had a guy on my jump seat, a fellow Acme pilot. His name, Bill Palmer. He was with the pre-merged Acme, the other, we'll call it Acme North airline, Airbus 330 instructor, or I think he was an instructor, or maybe something to do with flight safety, but he flew the Airbus 330. And we talked a little bit about this Air France crash, and I don't know if he wrote the book after I had my conversation with him years ago, or if he had already written it or was in the process of writing it. But he wrote this book called Understanding Air France 447. Again, his name, Bill Palmer. And I went ahead and bought the Kindle version of the book, and I've gotten through about the first third of it or so. And it kind of sets up the whole interaction of the autoflight system and pilots and the pitot tubes, and kind of a little historical data regarding all of that. And the thing that really struck me is that this event where airspeed probes, pitot tubes were blocked and gave erroneous airspeed data to the flight computers had happened many times before. It has been documented time and time again. And the thing that I think that I take away, and I think everybody should take away from it, is that in almost every single case before Air France 447, the pilots flying the airplane knew what to do instinctively. They flew the airplane. They used control performance. They set the appropriate pitch angle, the appropriate power setting. They basically left it as it was until the airspeed came back, after the pitot tubes became unobstructed. So this was a case, the Air France 447, where the pilot crew did not do the right thing. So the weakness here, the weak link, was the interpretation of the pilot crew to what was happening with the airplane. And so, I just wanted to mention that. And I'm continuing to read the book, and I'll probably have more to say about it in the future. And but based on what I've read so far, I definitely recommend the book to anybody out there who may be interested in that disaster, and perhaps the interesting conundrum that we face as far as the interface between autoflight and humans, and the fact that the critical component here is that interface between the two. So I think I've mentioned this. Let's see. Bruce, I'm not sure I agree that the system can't be turned off. I put in my notes here, what if the thing just started blaring all kinds of commands, on its own, that were in error? So I think that almost in any case, we should have the ability as pilots to override or turn off a system, if it's necessary. And anyway, again, overall, I believe something of the sort may have some merit. So thank you, Bruce, for taking the time. Obviously, you've clearly thought this out, and it's definitely something that is worth considering, in my opinion. So thanks again, Bruce, for taking the time, and thanks for listening and being part of the show. Let's go on with some audio feedback.
Hey, Captain Jeff, Chuck with Danish here. Sorry I haven't left you feedback in the last couple of months. Me and my wife both started school in September this year, so we've been real busy trying to study and get good grades. My wife's taking fashion design, and I'm doing my heavy-duty apprenticeship, as you know. So I'm almost done with the schooling part of it. I have about 2 weeks left now. So after that, I'll be back to work and start saving money to start my flight training. I just wanted to tell you about a cool little experience I had yesterday. I went to church with my wife yesterday, and I had the privilege to give a talk to the congregation. And in my talk, I mentioned how I want to be an airline pilot. And after the talk, a lot of people came up to me and mentioned to me that there's actually a pilot in the church I'm going to at the moment. I didn't get a chance to meet him yesterday, but I had a chance to talk to his wife, and she mentions he's a first officer for a major Canadian airline here, which is really awesome. And she told me a little bit about what he went through to get there, and she told me he followed quite a similar path to me, except he was a AME before he switched to becoming a pilot. So she told me to talk to him, and she said he had really good advice on how to land a pilot job here with, some lower hours. So, which will be, I'm really looking forward to talking to him. It'll be a really good experience, and he can answer some of my questions for me. And so now I won't have to bother you all the time. And I just had one quick question for you. So on the little clips you play of the ATC sometimes, I've noticed a lot of times they have static, or people are talking too fast, or you can't understand them. And I'm just wondering how long did it take for you to get used to that, or is it that bad all the time, or is it just some days where it'll be kind of staticky or people are talking too fast? So just wanted your opinion on that. If you could answer that, that'd be awesome. Again, thank you for the podcast, and I wish you safe flights and hope to talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
See, I knew that somebody had asked about, I didn't realize it was the very next piece of feedback. So, Danish, or Chocolate Danish, I answered your question in the previous feedback. But the other thing I want to add to communications, radio communications, is that sometimes, very rarely, they are hard to understand as far as static and that kind of thing, but very rarely. It's usually very, very clear. But as far as people talking very quickly, especially controllers giving instructions and that kind of thing, just like anything, after a while, you kind of start to expect to hear something from a controller. And so when he says something very fast, if it's something you've never heard before, you might say, what did he just say or she just say? But since you've been doing this year after year after year and working in this environment over and over and over again, you kind of go, okay, I understood what they said because I kind of expected them to say something like that. So that helps in understanding. Now, and that's one of the things that helps us when we go to places where there might be different language spoken, different accents, and that kind of thing. Sometimes, the only way you really understand what they're saying with a very heavy accent is that you kind of know basically what they're probably going to say. Now, that can lead to safety issues. If you really, let's say you're expecting them to say something and you really didn't understand what they said, but you assumed that this is what they said. Well, that can get you in trouble. But in most cases, especially in the environment that I fly, you can discern what the instruction was. And anytime you ever have a question about an instruction, it's always a free call to call them back and say, hey, just want to be clear here. Did you clear us to, please restate our altitude clearance or our speed clearance or whatever else. Sometimes that happens, it gets busy in the cockpit. The one of the pilots might be talking to one of the flight attendants on the interphone, or making a PA or whatever, and air traffic control gives us an instruction like Acme Flight 410, descend, maintain, flight level 260. And then the other person comes back into, the distraction from talking outside of the cockpit or whatever, and says, okay, I see we're descending. And usually the protocol is for the pilot flying to say, hey, we just received clearance to flight level 260. I'm descending now. And then, just to be sure, sometimes we go, do you mind if I, just clarify or, make sure that this is really what our clearance is? And so you make another call and say, hey, we just wanted to make sure that our clearance is to flight level 260. And in most cases, the controller will happily come back and give you the clearance again. And a lot of times they'll even thank you for doing that, because it just makes it easier for everybody to make sure that we're all on the same page. So, all right. So I hope that that answered that question, Danish. And that's cool that you have an airline pilot at your congregation. So, and hey, don't feel like you're bugging me. You guys aren't bugging me with questions. It's what this show is here for, to answer your questions. So, and if he gives you a different answer than I would give, well, then clearly he's wrong. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, Janelle sent something from her iPhone, and she said, this is a screenshot. That's not what she said. She said, this is a screenshot from my Flight Aware app. This is the airspace due south of St. Louis, where I live. This flight says it's Austin to Atlanta, and it looks like it turned around before getting to the weather front just east of the area in the picture. It's a mad dog, so I'm wondering why this particular flight turned around and why none of the others heading towards the storm have. It looks like it may be diverting to St. Louis, but I'm not sure yet. Thoughts? So she sent me the picture, and then she sent me another one with another picture. And let's see, she said in this one, it looks like they didn't divert, but they did basically a circle, and you can see the track. Again, this is flightaware.com, and you can see the flight path, and they basically just did one big loop in the lateral space, and then continued toward the frontal system. And I thought, wait a minute, Austin, Texas to Atlanta, and they're way up near St. Louis? I guess kind of that same kind of deal from, like my experience on yesterday's flight from Miami to New York via Ohio. But I wrote her back in tongue-in-cheek. I said, well, I have two theories regarding why you see them doing the circle. They had to circle to give them more time to build up their courage to continue into the stormy weather. And the second theory, the government wanted them to deposit more chemtrails, over that area. That's all I can say about it, since it's a very hush-hush operation, Again, of course, you all know that I'm kidding. That's all tongue-in-cheek. I have no idea why they did the maneuver they did. But anyway, they safely made it to Atlanta. But that was last week, where there was some pretty severe weather extending all the way through southern Texas, all the way almost to the Great Lakes. And so just thought I'd mention that little conversation that Janelle and I had. Jan from Switzerland says, first off, a big thanks for your excellent podcast. Thank you. I always look forward to the new episode, making my long daily commute much more enjoyable. Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Jan. Regarding Ross's questions on the British Airways London City service to New York, I'd like to chime in with some firsthand experience. Last June, I had the opportunity to fly on that service going from London to Los Angeles and compare the BA1 and New American Airlines Airbus Transcon services side by side, or leg to leg. Here are some facts. The London City to JFK route has been initiated and is still backed by some large corporations in the financial sector, shuttling their staff between London and New York. Hence, it is also called the Banker Shuttle. In regards to the fuel stop in Shannon, you're absolutely right. It is down to the runway length in London City that does not allow the Airbus 318 to take off with a full passenger load and full fuel load. Also, It enables passengers on the early BA-1 flight to clear customs in Shannon, arriving at JFK as a domestic flight. Why only BA-1 and not the later BA-3? The customs office at Shannon is already closed by that time, by the time they get there. BA is said to negotiate on this. It's only a 30-minute stop, and the benefit of being able to get off the plane and onto a yellow cab in New York City within 10 minutes is great. So is the onboard service. There are 4 flight attendants to the plane, giving them 8 passengers each to look after, together with really, and I mean possibly, the best food quality on an airplane you might get, in-flight meals. It makes it a joy to fly on. Most of the fellow passengers on my flights were BA or American Airlines top-tier frequent travelers, which oddly means you get on a plane with a bunch of well-behaving people. The return flight from Kennedy to London City is indeed a nonstop one, which in my case was a night flight. Having been on American and BA in business class on 777s on that route and once on Swiss in their A330 in first class, I'd still make the BA1 and 2 my favorite choice, although you won't find business discounted or semi-flex fares, putting the fare a bit over the top of what American Airlines would charge on that route. My connection from JFK to Los Angeles that day was one of the new American A321s, also in business class, and while the seat is quite comfortable or comparable in comfort, the service is from a different universe rather like premium economy on BA or a cheap business class like Air Transat or other leisure airline. Thanks again for your great podcast. Blue skies, happy landings. Greetings from Lucerne, Switzerland, Jan. Thank you, Jan. And by the way, you know that guy that I was talking about at the beginning of the episode, the Sky Typer lead solo, Steve, he actually flies those A321s coast to coast, that transcon service that you were speaking of. And he'd probably agree with you that the service is not going to be quite the same as the London City Kennedy service. So there you go. Thank you, Jan, for your review of London City to JFK and back and comparing it with American Airlines service. Nick Wilson writes, I'm a huge civil aviation fan and discovered your great podcast a couple of months ago. Thanks for taking the time out from your busy schedule to share your thoughts on aviation with the rest of the world. Well, you're quite welcome, Nick. Listening to Airline Pilot Guy, episode 138, the feedback from Nate discussing the art of the flare made me think of this YouTube video featuring a U.S. Airways Airbus 330. This sure is one smooth landing, and the A330 is such a graceful aircraft as it lands on its rear bogies at Manchester Airport here in the UK. Kudos to the crew for this landing. And then he has a link to that. I'll put that in the show notes. And it is indeed very well filmed. Well, not filmed, but videotaped. Well, not even videotaped. There's no tape anymore, is there? Anyway, great video, high definition video on YouTube of this beautiful A330 coming in for a landing, and it definitely is a graceful airplane. And he continues, they sure kept the nose up for a long time as they decelerated down the runway. What do you think of the landing? Too slow on bringing that nose gear down, or as smooth as silk? Not all aircraft seem to have such smooth landings as the Airbus 330. Does the rear bogie configuration have an impact on how smooth an aircraft touches down? The Boeing 767 rear bogies are configured the other way around. Front wheels touch down first. I live about 50 miles from London Heathrow and on the flight path for the transatlantic departures, so I get to see and hear many aircraft, albeit they are usually about 20,000 feet by the time they reach my neck of the woods. One thing I do miss is seeing that beautiful white arrow streaking across the sky. I think he's talking, oh yeah, you could set your watch by the Concorde as it rocketed through the airspace on departure twice daily from London Heathrow. We also have a couple of airfields in our local area, the closest being RAF Fairford, which is a U.S. Air Force standby airfield, which gets occasional visits from B-1, B-2, B-52, and KC-135 aircraft. Sorties were flown from the airfield in times of crisis in the Gulf Wars and Yugoslavian conflict. It was also the airfield where Concorde performed a lot of its flight testing, as well as being the UK's transoceanic abort landing site for the U.S. Space Shuttle during its years of operation. Thanks again for the great podcast, and there's a donation to your coffee fund on the way. Well, thank you, Nick. Appreciate that. With the usual wishes for clear skies, tailwinds, and smooth landings. And he says, P.S. I'm currently working my way through podcast from the start, currently on episode 36, so plenty more to go. Maybe it's me that needs the coffee. Yeah, I think you're right, Nick. You need the coffee. I should probably refund your contribution so you can spend it on yourself. So thanks again for the Coffee Fund contribution and for your feedback. Now, regarding main landing gear bogies, I've always wondered about that myself. Well, first of all, any airplane that has a main landing gear truck system or bogie system, in other words, if you're not familiar with that term, the airplane that I fly in the 727 and the narrow body Airbus, 320s, et cetera, those kind of airplanes, including all the regional jets and everything else, they have main landing gear wheels, and usually they're a pair on the left and a pair on the right, and that's it. But when you start getting into some of the larger airplanes, starting with the 757, the 767, the Airbus 330, et cetera, you start seeing these bogie systems where you have more than just two wheels on each side. So on the left main landing gear, a lot of the airplanes have four wheels instead of two. And so the system, I apologize for Cedric if you can hear him in the background. I know I can. He's getting agitated about something. It's that time of day. It's 6 o'clock, 6:17 to be exact. And I don't know if he's hungry or what he's doing up there. But again, I apologize for his squawking. And if you can't hear him, then forget that I said anything. Let's see, where was I? Okay, so these bogie systems, of course, the whole point of it is that, you have more wheels to kind of distribute the weight of the airplane. And it's not only important for the structure of the airplane, but probably even more important for the way that the runways are built and able to withstand pressure from the wheels. So, if you have a certain amount of pressure or weight from the airplane, but you have more wheels to more evenly distribute the weight, then it's easier on the runways touching down and easier on the taxiways, et cetera. They can only withstand so much pressure. And so that's the reason why we have these kind of systems. Now, the 777, they didn't stop at just 4 wheels per main landing gear bogie. They put on 6. Some airplanes, like the 747, or certain models of the 747, or maybe they all do, have actual center trucks, like on the center line of the fuselage, that come out in addition to the left main gear bogies and the right main gear bogie with all the wheels. The same thing with the Airbus A380. Again, all that weight, and you need to distribute that weight more evenly so you don't tear up the runways and taxiways. So, the only airplane that I've flown, trying to think, well, maybe the 141. No, the 141 really didn't have they did have more than just 2 wheels on either side, but it wasn't arranged in a bogie type system, like a truck system where you had one set of wheels touching down before the other. But the L-1011 was designed that way. And I can tell you, based on my experience of flying that airplane, that it was much easier to get a good landing because, excuse me, some of the energy is absorbed by the first couple of wheels touching down on each main landing gear system, and then the other ones come down. It just makes for a much more graceful and smooth kind of, landing. I was going to say something else, but the only word that came to my mind was landing. So, thank you. My wife is now rolling Cedric away from his position and hopefully to a place farther away because it's starting to irritate me. Okay, back to the main landing gear truck bogie system. So I've always wondered why it is that the 767, the Boeing 767, the main landing gear system has the front wheels of the bogie forward and the aft wheels, well, that doesn't make any sense. The forward wheels are hanging down lower than the rear wheels, as opposed to most of the systems like the Boeing 757, the Airbus 330, et cetera, where it's the opposite, where the rear wheels of the truck system are hanging down lower than the front wheels. And I've been told, again, I haven't flown the 767, that doesn't make a difference in the way the airplane lands or getting smooth landings or whatever. And so I did a little bit of research, and what I could find out, what I could determine was the reason that the Boeing 767 is different than almost every other airplane as far as the way the bogies hang down or the wheels hang down is the geometry of where the main landing gear struts are affixed to the wing, and the geometry, the arc of bringing the gear up so that the main landing gear system are all basically parallel with the center line of the fuselage when they're actually up in the landing gear bay. So I assume that, let me see if I'm going to get this right, that the hinge point on the 767 is farther back, either farther back or farther forward, I don't know, than the other configurations. And so because of the swing, that arc of bringing those wheels up into the main fuselage, it just naturally means that the forward wheels are going to be lower than the rear wheels. So that's the best I can do with that. It all has to do with where they've mounted the main landing gear to the wing and the swing or the arc of the landing gear coming up into the main fuselage, and for those wheels to end up parallel with the center line of the fuselage. And if somebody else has a better explanation of that, then I welcome your explanation. But that's what I could determine. So, and apparently, as I said, from people that have flown the airplane to everything that I can read, it doesn't really have an effect at all on getting a smooth landing. You know, as long as you have trucks out there, I don't care whether the front wheels are hanging down first or the back wheels are hanging down first. Apparently, it doesn't matter. Now, I know that many of you out there listening, First Officer Jeff, I know that Rick has flown the 767. Maybe you guys can chime in and let me know if I'm on the mark here or if I'm completely screwed up. Okay. So thank you very much. And Nick Wilson, thanks for your question regarding that. And again, if you want to see that beautiful touchdown by the Airbus 330, I have the link in the show notes. Speaking of Rick, he sent me some feedback, and he sent this before our meetup in Miami. And so let's take a listen, okay?
Hey, Captain Jeff, how are you? It's Rick again from
Fine,
Miami. I am currently in Miami on my on the last day of a 6-day block of days off that I had here. So that's nice, you know. Just did a little brushing up on my simulator procedures. Got my recurrent at the end of the month, and then right now I'm just hanging out by the touchdown zone of runway 9er out here. It's a beautiful day. And listeners from Miami will be familiar with the parking lot out here by the El Dorado Furniture. And if you heard that popping sound there, I apologize. They put up a new bird air cannon out here to keep birds away from the airplanes. Just watching some airplanes come in. It's a really, really nice day. It's kind of windy out, so they're doing all sorts of maneuvering out here to try to keep them on center line. But anyway, I was listening to episode 136 and Dave's question about the autopilot controlling the rudder, and then again, you know, it's exactly as you said. During most phases of flight, the way that turns are kept coordinated is with the yaw damper or yaw dampener. But the rudder is connected to the autopilot on certain phases of flight, and this is again airplane specific. I'm talking about the only two big airliners I've flown, you know, the 76 and the 777. And then on both the 76 and 777, when you're coming in on an ILS, you know, you're tracking both the localizer and glide slip signals at 1,500 feet radio altitude. And radio altitude is the altitude of the airplane above the terrain it's flying over at that time. The Autoland system is going to go through a self-test and then arm itself. Basically, once that happens, then the autopilot system is going to take over the elevators, which it was already doing, and the ailerons. But then it's also going to take over the rudder. Oh, there's a 7.6 coming in right now, and he's fighting that crosswind. Wow. And it is company traffic. Let's see how he lands it. He's fighting it. And he's down. Yep. There's that right wheel. Yeah, you have a pretty strong wind here from the south. But anyway, so the reason why the rudder is going to be controlled by the autopilot during Autoland operations is because the airplane needs to be able to control the side slip maneuver when there are crosswind conditions out there, and you know, that wing low method. And in order to do that, you need control of the rudder. Now, on the 767, remember, you have to be really careful when flying single engine approaches, because you basically at 1,500 feet, I mean, you'd fly the entire approach procedure single engine. You had to trim, you know, with your foot, and then, you know, just basically zero the trim out with the trim wheel in the back of the center pedestal. And then once the autopilot took over the rudder at 1,500 feet, you could do one of two things. You could either center the trim, go back to zero, you know, expecting that you were going to land, but, you know, 9 times out of 10, the instructor would not let you see the runway, and then you'd have to do a go-around. Now, the way we used to do it, well, every pilot did it during the simulator, was to fly the approach in automatic down to minimums. When you are flying a single engine on a 767, you can't do an auto land, so you have to disconnect the autopilot above 50 feet radio. So everybody would just fly the plane down to about, you know, 100 feet, disconnect then, and then land it. And a lot of guys would, you know, just basically bring the rudder trim back to zero. Now, that could come back and bite you, because if you did do a go around, you would do the go around automatically, of course. And if you forgot that you had put your rudder trim back to zero, the second you changed your lateral mode from track into localizer to any other lateral mode, be it head and select or lateral navigation, to start tracking the missed approach procedure, the autopilot would no longer control the rudder. So the rudder would be kicked out, and if you had go-around power with the single engine and the rudder trim at zero, then it was real easy to lose control, and at the very least look kind of stupid in front of the instructor. So you had to be careful. You had to be ready to either kick the rudder in, you know, really quick and try to compensate for that yaw, or what I would used to do is I would leave the rudder maybe about I don't know, I'd leave, you know, 3 or 4 units of rudder trim in case I needed to go around. On the 777, it's much nicer, because on the 777 we have a system called the TAC. The TAC stands for Thrust Asymmetry Compensator, Thrust Asymmetry Computer. Basically what that does is, when the system senses that there's a difference of 10% N1 between the right or left engine, it'll start kicking in the rudder to keep you flying straight. Now, the TAC is always connected through the fly-by-wire system on all phases of flight, and then the autopilot takes control of the rudder below 1,500 feet, as it does on the 767. You know, which, you know, the nice thing about it is that when you do go around this on the 777 and you switch from tracking the localizer to either LNAV or head and select to start flying the missed approach procedure, once the rudder is kicked out, then the TAC takes over, and you can forget about having to deal with the rudder trim. So I hope I made myself, I hope I explained myself halfway decently there. That's it from here from Miami, Captain Jeff. I'm gonna head down to South America tomorrow for a quick turnaround trip. I'll be down in Quito for a couple hours, be back up here tomorrow afternoon, and then the day after that I'm heading down to Central America, down to Costa Rica and Guatemala for the day, and then I'll be back up here. So Too short, quick turnaround trip, which is always nice. That's it from up here. Hope you're doing great. Keep the great shows coming. And we'll talk to you again very, very soon. See ya.
360, just to maintain 1,500. 360,
You know, I heard some of that radio communication in the background there, and they said something about a Lufthansa Super 380. I wonder.
Hey, Captain Jeff, Rick from Miami. Quick note here. Lufthansa A380 landing here on runway 9. Coming in right now. Very, very heavy crosswind from the south here. He's doing all sorts of maneuvers to try to keep it down center line. Just listen to that. Beautiful. Drifting, and you got it down. I just thought I'd share that with you. Hope you're doing great. All the best. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Rick, for your feedback. Both pieces there. And again, great meeting you the other day in Miami at the filling station. I need to, next time I see you, Rick, and I'm sure I'll be seeing you more in the future, I need to give you one of these things, these little foam windscreens. I usually have one with me so that when I do a iPhone or smartphone recording, you can just slip it right over the phone and it covers up that microphone and then you don't have all that wind noise. Anyway, that did not detract in the least, though, your great feedback. So thank you for that. And just being there, the ambiance of hearing those jets coming down, landing on the runway there at Miami International, very, very cool. And the other thing I wanted to say, really struck me that somebody who does this for a living and, you know, flying all the time, actually taking the time to come to the airport and watch airplanes land, that's a true aviation enthusiast. And, you know, it's funny, most of the people that I know that do this job are the same way. I mean, you know, we hear an airplane flying overhead and we, again, 99% of us will look up, you know, and just, you can't get enough of it, right? So thanks for that. And thanks for the explanation about the rudder and the zeroing out the rudder trim and the things that you have to be careful of. Every airplane that I've flown on single engine approaches with the trim set, you know, to compensate for the yaw and the single engine operation or engine out operation, usually somewhere around the last 50 feet and you're in the flare transition is when either you have the flight engineer on the 727 or the other pilot on the airplane that I'm flying now kind of, you know, zero out the trim or at least, you know, zero out or get most of it out. But as you mentioned, you have to be aware of the fact that if you have to go around, you're going to have a very high power setting, very asymmetric thrust. And and think about the fact that when you're pushing that rudder down with your leg, before you switch that autopilot switch on, you better make sure that you relieve that trim on the rudders before you engage the autopilot, because you could get in trouble unless you're on a very fancy airplane like that 777. So very cool. So again, thanks, Rick, for your feedback. And by the way, he did send me some photos of his trip down to Quito and a little bit of weather that he had to avoid going in there, and that was really cool. So thanks again, Rick, for all your contributions to the show. Let's see. Let's keep going here. Nick Carson writes, as you know, I flew Atlanta, LaGuardia, BTV, Burlington, Vermont, this past weekend. Well, that's not exactly what happened. You know, I made the first segment just fine. Then here we are at LaGuardia. We got bumped from LaGuardia to Burlington, and for the rest of the day, it didn't look so good for us. Now, just as an aside here, Captain Jeff speaking, Nick is in a family that has flight travel benefits, standby travel benefits. So the reason why he got bumped from the flight is because they were traveling standby. Okay, back to Nick. With quick thinking, my father made tickets on JetBlue from Kennedy to Burlington. So we made that flight and spent the weekend in Canada. Then on the way back to Atlanta, we did Burlington, LaGuardia, Atlanta on Acme. We got to LaGuardia on the CRJ700, and that's when the fun began. To put it simply, we were number 86 to number 88 on the standby list with a full flight for the day. We said that there is no hope, and we went to Southwest on a 8:30 flight from LaGuardia to Atlanta. Let's say that out of 143 seats, we were numbers 140 through 143. After arrival in Atlanta, I asked the flight attendant, as the pilots were not on board, if we could see the flight deck. With that, she allowed me, by myself, to see it. Shortly after, a captain walked in, started flicking some buttons and switches, which included the connection to the ground power unit, turning off the auxiliary power unit, and turning off the two packs and the APU bleed switch. Any ideas why he would have done this? I do send my apologies for the long-winded feedback and my best regards to you and your family. Oh, not at all, Nick. Okay, so I'm thinking what you saw is exactly what you saw. He came in, the airplane was there, had the APU running. The APU was powering the airplane with electricity, and it was also powering the air conditioning packs to keep the airplane cool. What he did was he said, we have external power connected in the ground power unit, and we have external air connected. So there's no reason for us to be burning fuel unnecessarily with the auxiliary power unit. So I'm going to turn off the APU and turn off the packs. So if you don't have the APU on and you have the pack switches on, they're not doing anything anyway, because the APU is what's supplying that bleed air to the air conditioning system. So that is what he did. That's my guess, which is exactly what I would do if I came to an airplane and the APU was still running and we had ground power and ground air. I would turn off the APU, unless for some reason the conditions were such and it was such a hot day that the ground external air was not doing a good job of keeping the airplane cool or keeping it warm or whatever it was doing. Then I would start up the APU or leave the APU running and to help augment that so that the cabin was as comfortable as possible for the passengers. Let's see. He also sent more feedback here. After you left the Air Force and joined Acme, did the thought of you being drafted back into service if the U.S. government, needed you for whatever reason, did that cross your mind? Yeah, it did. In fact, when I left the Air Force, I resigned my regular officer's commission, but I kept my reserve officer's commission, which meant that I was still fully qualified to be an officer in the U.S. Air Force. And if they needed me, they could always activate me or reactivate me. When the Gulf War, Saddam Hussein and all that kind of stuff was going on in the Gulf states and in Iraq, and they were kind of gearing up, and they were in the midst of Operation Desert Shield, which was their preliminary effort before the real deal Desert Storm. I started seeing all this pointing to, again, another operation that they could possibly require people, that they don't have to come back in to help out. And when I saw that, I'm thinking, I haven't flown the C-141 in years. The last assignment that I had was, as an instructor pilot, and that's not what we call a major weapon system identifier, and they weren't at that time using reserve pilots to do that job, only active duty pilots. So I thought, well, if they call me up, I doubt that they're going to send me back to get checked out on the C-141 because it's been so many years. And I kept thinking to myself, they're going to send me out there and I'm going to be a supply officer out in the middle of the desert. And that did not sound very good to me. So I went ahead, about a year after I got out, I sent a letter to the Air Force Reserve Authority, or whatever that's called, out in somewhere near Denver, Boulder, I think. Or no, I don't know where they are. And said I would like to resign my reserve officer's commission. And I was very surprised when about 2 weeks later I got a letter saying that, okay, we've accepted your resignation and you are no longer a reserve officer. And so that basically, anything could have happened, I guess, Nick, but that basically somewhat guaranteed that I wasn't going to be drafted or called back into service at that point. And I was about 31 years old, and I don't know what the cutoff is, but the older you get, the more the government says, you're too old. We don't want you to to help us out. We need the young people like you, Nick. I know you're younger than military age right now, but it won't be long. So no, I didn't. The only thought of being drafted back into service, or actually coming back into the service, was the possibility of in some kind of an officer position for the Desert Storm thing, and that's when I resigned my reserve commission because I hadn't affiliated with any reserve unit actively. So I just kind of kept it there as a just in case I decide that I need to get involved with the Air Force Reserve or the Air National Guard. I knew that I could kind of keep that somewhat active in the background, but I finally just said, that's enough. I'm not going back in. I'm going to be 100% civilian. Let's see. The second thing he said, how often, if ever, do you fly into or out of Houston Intercontinental? That's cyclical. I get in and out of there probably, I don't know, 5-6 times a year, I would guess. Usually 1 month I might fly a trip that goes in there like every week. But I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at all my flights to see, or my schedules to see, how often I get in and out of there. But I'd say just off the top of my head, probably half a dozen times a year. He says, please feel free to use this at your discretion. Oh, thank you, Nick. And then finally, he sent me a video and some pictures of him sitting in the cockpit of an airplane that I recognize. It's my airplane. Well, not mine, but an airplane just like the one that I fly. And and he also sent me a video with a little bit of, showing me some of the switches and stuff like that. And let's see, I'll try to remember to get to put the one or both of these pictures, Nick, in the show notes so people can see what you look like and you sitting there in the Mad Dog. And then finally, he sent me a picture of the back end of a MD, is that an 88 or 90? 90. I'm looking at it sideways. And he says, when I was about to taxi out to the active, I saw the pipe-like object from the ground connected to the tail of an MD-90. Can you explain why this would be? Yes, I can. That hose right there, which is, they just turned off the external air. I was just talking about external power and external air. Well, that and the 90 is the place that they put in the treated or conditioned air. In the summertime, it's going to be cold air, and then in the wintertime, it's going to be warm air from a ground air unit. That's where they connect it in the back of the MD-90. On the 88, they connect it somewhere on the left side near the front. So that hose that you see there in the very aft end of the MD-90 is the conditioned air or external air hose. And right now it's not inflated because it looks like the airplane is getting ready to push back from the gate, and they probably just turned off the external air, and so there's no air flowing through it at this point. So it looks like they're about to, either they just put it on or they are about to disconnect it. I can't tell. So that is the answer to that question. Thanks, Nick, for your feedback. Let's see. First Officer Jeff just sent me a quick note. He says, I'm sure you've gotten enough on the American Airlines 757 with the cabin wall popping out. Anyway, here's an article telling it like it is. This doesn't happen often enough. Well, that's for sure, isn't it? He's talking about the American Airlines 757 that took off from San Francisco, and they were headed to, where were they headed to? Dallas, Fort Worth. And at some point after takeoff, let's see what happened here. There was like a big pop, loud popping and ripping sounds. One of the passengers said it sounded like bowling balls were falling from the overhead bins. Several plastic interior panels snapped out and became pinned to the window seats in one row, exposing insulation. Passengers called for flight attendants and watched nervously as they inspected the damage. It turned out it was just a cosmetic problem, not a crack in the airplane's skin. That would have been far more serious, but the pilot decided to turn the plane around anyway after checking for himself about 45 minutes into the flight. So this article goes on to very clearly say, what happened and, why not turn around immediately, and how often do these panels fall off, and etc. So again, I agree with Jeff that the reporting in this case was done very well, which is in opposition to most of the reporting out there from journalists that know nothing about aviation. And in fact, I'm going to jump forward a couple here. Janelle sent me, she says, not sure if you've seen this, but it's pretty funny. And she says, maybe in mine, there will be 937 terrified passengers on a B717. Thought you might enjoy. And she sent me a link. And let me go over here to my browser. Excuse me. Where was it? The Lazy Journalist's Plain Story Generator. You know, do you remember when you were a kid, or maybe you had kids that played this game called Mad Libs, where you basically have a story and you have blanks to fill in various nouns and verbs and adjectives. And so this is kind of like that. And again, it's the Lazy Journalist's Plain Story Generator. And then it says, choose an appropriate headline for your story. And then he has a pop-down menu: terrified passengers in dread flight, flight from hell, place horror, technical glitch scares passengers, bits fall off plane, flight goes horribly wrong. Actually, I think I've seen that one in a real headline. And then it starts off by saying, choose origin of passengers. Passengers left last night told of their choose over-the-top emotion aboard a choose where the plane was bound. Choose the airline flight, which was choose how the aircraft was returned, to return to choose actual destination yesterday due to a choose malfunction. Some passengers were choose emotion, that the choose amount of passengers were told few details of the choose one of these. So anyway, it goes on, and you should check it out yourself. It even has a place at the very end to choose an image to go along with your story. So, and I really do think that some of the stories that I've read, that we have read, they may have actually used this story generator. So thank you, Janelle. I thought that went well with First Officer Jeff's link to the journalist that actually made a lot of sense and wasn't sensational. Okay, let's see. How about let's hear some audio feedback from our main man.
Hey, Captain Jeff. It's your main man, Micah, here, direct from Portland. And coming to you with a couple of questions based on the past few Airline Pilot Guy shows. You talked a little bit about what happened on JetBlue and the oxygen masks being dispensed for smoke, which, from what I gather, was a completely wrong thing to do. But smoke in a cabin has been an issue for a long time, and actually as far back as, I think it was 1987, based on Air Canada Flight 797 that landed on fire in Cincinnati. They talked about adding smoke hoods to the life-saving items aboard a commercial aircraft. Along with a life jacket, there would be smoke hoods just in the event of such a fire or smoke in the cabin. And this seems like something that's a good idea and really not too expensive to install. I think the smoke hoods themselves are only about $15 to $20, and it's good for about a half an hour's worth of air purification. Could save a lot of lives. I'm wondering what you think about that. I know that the decision was made that it would be too confusing to passengers. It would heat evacuation and slow down the process. But I'm wondering if it was a cost factor or if maybe it just really wouldn't work. And I'm wondering what your opinion on that might be. Second question I have for you, which I asked quite a long time ago in an email, and I don't think you ever got around to answering, is that as a pilot who has flown on the three major U.S. manufacturers of aircraft, you fly McDonnell Douglas aircraft, you've flown Boeing aircraft, and you've also flown Lockheed aircraft. I'm wondering if, as a pilot, when you get on the flight deck of any one of those manufacturers, obviously two of them have merged, but if you notice a real difference in the flight deck if you're blindfolded and taken onto a flight deck of any one of those aircraft, an L-1011 or a 727 or a Mad Dog, if you not just see a difference on the flight deck in terms of the size and shape and everything, but if there's a real design difference, I'm not sure if I'm making myself clear, but I'm just wondering if there are really any different manufacturers' techniques. Again, for example, on an Airbus, you know you're on an Airbus because they're egg whites. They don't have any yolk. But I'm wondering if there are any more subtle differences between those three manufacturers. And lastly, I wanted to tell you and your listeners about a wonderful series that I've been watching on Amazon Prime. It's old. It dates back quite a few years, I think. Anyway, it's called The Amazing World of Aviation. And it starts with the beginning of flight, but the parts of it, it's a 13-part series that I have just really enjoyed, is beginning with the jet age, when they go back to the history of commercial aviation and commercial jets, and go through all that right into supersonic flight, and just a wonderful little 13-part series. It runs an hour long. I think it was British or Canadian, perhaps Australian made, but mostly in black and white, a lot of newsreels, and something that if you're on Amazon Prime anyway, it's for free, and you can put on your watch list and pick up an episode at a time. They run about 15 minutes each. Anyway, thanks so much for a wonderful podcast. Look forward to hearing the next one, and hoping that I don't sound too confused as I'm talking to you here or sending in this file scriptless. Thanks so much, and have a great day. It's your main man, Micah, here in Portland, signing out.
Well, thank you, Micah, for your feedback. As always, we appreciate it. And I thought that I had that Amazon Prime. Yeah, here it is. That program, The Amazing World of Aviation series. I am a Amazon Prime member, and so I looked it up, and I plan on watching this. It looks really interesting. Let's just take a little snippet from the very first episode.
The early days of powered flight were filled with exhilaration and peril. Technology advanced with astounding speed, from wooden struts and bicycle wheels to jet engines in less than half a century. Air travel brought continents together and opened a world of possibilities. The story of aviation is about the mechanics, the pilots, the inventors, and the thrill seekers. It's the story of ingenuity and perseverance, of a dream that refused to die.
All right, so there's a little teaser for those of you who are Amazon Prime members. You can find the Amazing World of Aviation series. It's a 13-part series, and that was the very beginning of episode 1, Takeoff, the beginning of flight. And I look forward to watching it. Thank you for that great suggestion, Micah. Okay, let's get back to your feedback. And you talked about the Air Canada DC-9 that caught on fire, and unfortunately many people died. And they talked about putting on smoke hoods, also known as protective breathing equipment, or PBEs. Most airplanes do have them now, not for each passenger, but they do have them for the crew. On the airplane that I fly, we have 4 in total, 1 on the flight deck and 3 in the passenger cabin. And they're designed to protect crew members from the effects of smoke, carbon dioxide, or other harmful gases while combating fires. And then, let's see, basically the thing has 2 oxygen cylinders that when you pull the thing apart, the neck opening, it activates the cylinders simultaneously. One cylinder discharges rapidly to purge the hood of any contaminated air. And it says, in order to receive the full benefit of the purging, you must get the hood on quickly within 15 seconds. The second oxygen cylinder releases slowly, lasting 7 to 8 minutes. After both cylinders have fully discharged, the hood provides an additional 7 to 8 minutes of breathable air. So you have anywhere from about 14 to 16 minutes of breathable air. And then after that, you need to be away from the smoke situation. Otherwise, you could suffocate with that hood on. So, and I'm not sure exactly how much those things cost. I doubt that they're as cheap as $15 to $20 a piece, especially anything to do with passenger aviation. It's got to be a lot more expensive than that. And I suspect that that's why, and perhaps maybe some maintenance issues, keeping them, in service and testing on them and all that kind of stuff. I would suspect that the reason why we don't see them. Would it be safer if we all, had a smoke hood like that at the ready at each passenger seat? Yes. Is it practical for the airlines? I'm not sure. And again, I don't know what the actual reasoning is why we don't have them for everybody on board, but your guess is as good as mine. But I would guess it has something to do with the money, Let's see. And then the other thing, you asked about, and I was just about to gloss over once again, and I don't do that intentionally. That sometimes little questions get lost in the shuffle for me. Flight deck design. Not really. The only thing I could say that was different on the both Lockheed jets that I flew is that the engineers with the flight instrumentation tended to prefer vertical tape kind of displays for setting power and altitude and different instruments. They used a lot of the vertical presentation of things instead of the round dial presentation. The Boeing 727 and the Mad Dogs that I fly right now, are all the round gauges kind of display. And even the more modern airplanes, all the Boeings that I know of, with the flat panel displays, they'll still indicate the engine instruments using the round gauge kind of display, not the vertical tape display. But that's just my top of the head impression of the possible differences in the cockpits. But otherwise, they had the standard looking instrumentation, the typical T kind of setup for attitude indicator and nav display and airspeed, vertical speed, that kind of thing. Nothing that you would say like immediately if you poked your head into a cockpit and go, "Oh, this is definitely a Boeing," or "This is definitely a McDonnell Douglas product," or whatever. Not like you would get the impression or the impression that you would get if you poked your head inside an Airbus cockpit and then you go, "Oh, well, there's definitely something different about this airplane with the side stick controllers." There's no yoke there obstructing your view of the instruments. So that's the best I can do with that. So hope that helped, Micah, and I appreciate your feedback as always. Speaking of smoke hoods and other devices like chem suits, Corey Huffer says I just saw on Nightly News. I'm sorry, Corey. I'm not sure if that's kind of one of those names. I think it's a guy, but it could be a girl. I just saw on Nightly News that they loaded the second diagnosed Ebola patient onto a CDC aircraft, and everybody was suited up to prevent contamination. It made me wonder if the pilots also would be required to do the same. I know that military pilots have chem suits that they can use. Is there a commercial equivalent? Wishing you many clear weather days, no maintenance issues, and passengers that don't board your plane with Ebola. Thanks, Corey. The jet that I don't remember if I talked about this on a previous episode or not. I think I was thinking about it, and then I think I may have eliminated it from the topics of discussion. But the jet that is being used now to transport some of the Ebola victims, like the one that transported the Ebola victims from Africa to the United States to Atlanta here. And they also use that same airplane to transport the healthcare worker at the Dallas hospital to the hospital in Baltimore, Maryland. And that is well, let me start reading this article here. That'd be easier. November 173 Papa Alpha looks like it belongs to the military. In fact, the U.S. Air Force and USMC have an almost identical paint job on some of their C-20 aircraft. And like the November 173 Papa Alpha, some of them also feature a massive clamshell cargo door as well. This 32-year-old Gulfstream III was once owned and operated by the Royal Danish Air Force and wore the military tailcode F313 at the time. The jet still retains her original Royal Danish Air Force livery, minus the government titles and insignia, of course. Foxtrot 313 was sold to the U.S. military air support provider Phoenix Air in January of 2005. Phoenix Air is well known for providing adversary support and electronic warfare training to the Department of Defense. With their massive fleet of Tiger-striped Learjets being forward-based near key U.S. naval installations, they can often be seen lugging electronic warfare pods and anti-ship missile emitter simulators. These jets fly attack profiles on U.S. Navy ships and air defense units, mimicking the tactics and technologies of America's potential enemies. In addition to their Learjet fleet, Phoenix Air has two nearly identical Gulfstream 3s intercontinental business jets, which are used for rapid cargo transport and air ambulance duties. So Phoenix Air, by the way, is just up to the north of Atlanta in Cartersville, Georgia, and that's where they're headquartered. And that's, I believe, where that November 173 Papa Alpha resides. And so it's outfitted with a modular aeromedical biological containment system, a tent-like plastic structure that is provided with negative air pressure to keep pathogens from entering the cabin. This is in addition to the jet's already extensive medical equipment that can be configured to treat and monitor the patient's unique symptoms during a flight. And so basically, as far as I know, the pilots that are operating the airplane for Phoenix Air, because of the fact that the aeromedical biological containment system with the negative air pressure do not suit up in that chem gear, as far as I know. I wasn't able to actually determine that based on this particular article, but as far as I know, no, they don't. And, pretty brave people to take on that duty because they must know that they're going to possibly be exposed to viruses and bacteria and that kind of thing. So anyway, thanks for the feedback, Corey. Hope that answered your question. And if anybody knows any more about it and whether the pilots are actually wearing chem gear, which I really doubt, let me know. Let's see. This is from Kib, the guy who saw a creature on the wing. I talked about this on one of the previous episodes during a flight. And I couldn't remember if it was Outer Limits or the Twilight Zone. The passenger name was Bob Wilson, who was played by William Shatner in a Twilight Zone episode. Wilson observes the monster tear pieces from the wing and drop them into the air intake of the jet engine. Actually, not quite. It was a propeller engine, and he was actually kind of prying apart pieces of the nacelle of the number 2 engine, prop engine. And the name of the episode, Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. Let's listen.
You unlock this door with the key of imagination. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of sound. A dimension of sight. A dimension of mind. You're moving into a land of both shadow and substance, of things and ideas. You've just crossed over into the Twilight Zone.
The Twilight Zone.
Honey, what is it? You want to move?
No. Doesn't matter. What's the difference where I sit? It's not the seat, it's the airplane. Julia, there's a man out there. I don't mean a man, I mean I don't know what I mean. I mean, maybe what do they call them during the war? Gremlins. Gremlins. You remember the stories in the... Julia, don't look at me like that.
Bob.
I am not imagining it. I'm not imagining it. He's out there.
He really is out there. Ooh, scary. Great show, Twilight Zone. Again, the episode was Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. Thank you, Kib, for straightening that out. Let's see. William from KDOV, Dover, says, "Hey, Cap Jeff, I don't know if you've ever seen this or not, but I seriously think it's worth a look. That 3D imaging of the terrain looks to be priceless, but bears a strong risk for dependency. I know you have talk about airplanes that will auto-descend with the loss of pressure. That's just one of the many super features these jets have. And he gave me a link to the Dassault Falcon video. And here, let me see if I can pull that up. It's called the EASY flight deck, the most intuitive man-machine interface in an airplane. Let's see. Let's listen to a little bit of this.
In 2003, Falcon introduced the Easy Flight Deck. Easy was a breakthrough that dramatically improved situational awareness and decreased pilot workload and stress. And now pilots from more than 400 Falcon operators have helped us make it even better in the Easy 2 flight deck. It's a major upgrade based on improvements in existing technologies as well as feedback from operators, and it includes a suite of new features to increase situational awareness, safety, and efficiency. Starting with a synthetic vision system that lets you see not only your exact position, but your exact situation.
It's a 3-minute, 13-second video, and I'll have a link to it in the show notes so you can watch it yourself. Very cool. The Easy 2 flight deck interface or system, and on the Falcon jets. And it is really amazing. I really like that synthetic flight, what do they call that? It's synthetic flight view, where basically you have like a HUD overlay and then simulated terrain and structures and runways in the background. It's really, really nice. And I think something like that would be fantastic to have in every single airplane. I don't, again, I don't want people to get the impression that I am against automation. Absolutely not. And having these kind of systems and instrumentation would be amazing. And I would love to fly an airplane that had that. Flying in a Category 3 situation when you don't see anything but your instrumentation in the cockpit would really be nice if you had synthetic vision to kind of show you what you would be able to see if you didn't have the obstruction of visibility. And I think that would be really, really cool. So again, check out this Dassault Falcon Easy Flight Deck or Easy 2 Flight Deck video, again, in the show notes. So let me get back here to Evernote. Thank you very much, William, from KDOV, which is Dover. And let's move on with Nick. He says, working my way through your earlier podcasts, many items of feedback from your friend Brian Pottinger in Indonesia reminded me of this TV series from Channel 4 here in the UK. The hand-flying and extreme airstrips in the show certainly aren't for the faint-hearted. It was an excellent and enjoyable series, which left me in awe of the pilot's skills. I bet you're glad that Acme doesn't fly into these airports, or would you welcome the challenge? And then he goes on to say, what is the most challenging airport in terms of terrain that you fly your Mad Dog into? We have some places, out west near, and they're not that bad. Up in the Northern Rockies, and we have some approaches in the Smokies or the Blue Ridge Mountains near Asheville, Roanoke, Virginia, etc. Not a lot of super challenging places that we fly the Mad Dog, but check out the series. He sent a link to episode 1 of the series, and let me play a little bit about it or of it, and let's see. The first episode, maybe the whole thing is called "Worst Place to Be a Pilot." Yeah, that's it. That's the name of the series. And this is a little excerpt of Season 1, Episode 1 on YouTube.
Pull up. Pull up. Don't sink.
Young British pilots are earning their wings in the skies above Indonesia.
Caution, terrain.
It's one of the most dangerous places to fly in the world.
You're looking at a wreck site.
With almost no aviation jobs in the UK, Brits with little flying experience.
Oops. I was hoping to stop it before that bad word. I'll have to edit that out. Anyway, really fascinating. I looked at this, watched some of the, and Brian has sent me pictures of some of the airstrips that he lands on, and the same kind of thing in this series, them flying in Indonesia, and you will not believe. You really have to check this out. You will not believe some of the places they're landing airplanes on. It's just incredible. I mean, unbelievable. And you really need to check it out. Worst Place to Be a Pilot, Season 1. Well, it has the full season, I believe, on YouTube. And thanks for pointing that to me, Nick. And now the listeners can check it out for themselves. Excellent. Again, link in the show notes. Brendan in Chicago writes, again, want to thank you for your excellent show. Thank you. Having found APG about a month or so ago, I'm enjoying listening to your new shows while also trying to catch up on previous episodes. You guarantee I have something interesting and entertaining to listen to during my commute to work on the train. Your feedback from Tim Van Ram in 139 about Columbine 2 reminded me of a great documentary about the history of Air Force One, first produced for PBS in the mid-1980s. Jimmy Stewart narrated the original production. Somewhere I still have a VHS copy of that show recorded off-air during the Reagan administration. Charleston Heston narrated a revised version with some of the original script and footage once the U.S. Air Force took delivery of two VC-25As, which are Boeing 747-200Bs, for executive flight. The two 747s, which we today commonly associate with Air Force One, have tail numbers 28000 and 29000. They replaced two VC-137Cs, which were the 707-353 models, with tail numbers 26,000 and 27,000. 26,000 was delivered during the JFK administration and flew his body home from Dallas, and 27,000 to Nixon. 26,000 is currently at the U.S. Air Force Museum in Dayton, 27,000 at Reagan's Library in California. Must be a big library to put that big airplane in. Here's a link to the Heston version of the documentary on YouTube. Again, more links for you to watch, to click on in the show notes. And let's see, one of the most interesting parts of the documentary is when Colonel Ralph Albertazzi, President Nixon's pilot, recounts his experience taking Nixon from Washington to California after the resignation in 1974. He and others talk about how, as of the word God in Gerald Ford's oath, the aircraft, then near Jefferson City, Missouri, changed call signs from Air Force One to SAM 27,000. SAM stands for Special Air Mission. So at the very moment, so help me God, Gerald Ford, in his presidential oath of office, the call sign switched from Air Force One to SAM 27,000. So, or 27000. I'm not sure how they would say that. As always, clear skies to you, Brendan Cosgrove in Chicago. Thank you, Brendan. Great story. And again, we'll check out that link on YouTube of the Charleston Heston narration of the documentary. Darren writes from the UK, thanks for the great podcast. Just like your take on a story. Oh, he would just like my take on a story that he was reading in one of the newspapers involving an EasyJet captain, where he asked passengers to volunteer to get off because the airplane was too heavy to take off. He said wind conditions meant that the Airbus 319's weight made it unsafe to leave crew members. And so they asked for volunteers as the jet stood at the gate in London Southend Airport. And then he says, as a captain, have you ever had to do this? No. I mean, that kind of thing is handled by when load planning determines that for whatever reason, the airplane can't handle the full load of passengers. And if you've made the mistake of already boarding the airplane, and then you have to go through the process of taking passengers off, fortunately for me at Acme Airlines, that's not my job. Now, of course, I'll help in any way as necessary with communication or whatever I need to do. But I'm not going to be the guy saying, hey, I'm looking for volunteers to get off the airplane, because that's kind of beyond my pay scale. That's something that would be the bailiwick of the gate agents and redcoats, we call them, the supervisors that would come on and say, look, we've just learned that for, again, whatever reason, you're wondering, well, what could the reason be? Well, sometimes if the weather is bad enough, you need a destination alternate and perhaps even a takeoff alternate. And sometimes that means that the extra fuel load required to be legal and safe is going to be either putting you over the maximum takeoff weight for the departure airport, or it could mean that if you don't use that alternate diversion fuel at your primary airport, if you actually get airborne, you will be overweight for landing at the destination. So they work all this stuff out, all these figures and weight and balance and everything else. And the load planning department says, you know what, because we have to add this extra fuel for whatever reason, the weather at the destination, let's say, we have calculated that if this fuel's not burned, then you're going to be overweight. And, you cannot plan to dispatch an airplane overweight for an overweight landing at the destination. Now, if for some reason you have an emergency or whatever, then, there are options for you in that case. But you cannot plan to launch an airplane with a possibility of an overweight landing at the destination. So that could be why, in this case, they said, you know what, because of the weather, we have to take some people off. Now, most of the time, you know that before you even start boarding a flight. And so you start dealing with that whole issue in the gatehouse before people actually walk down the jetway and get on the airplane. It's much, much easier handled that way. Now, it still doesn't mean that everybody's going to be happy, because it means that you may have booked every seat on that flight, and that means that some people are going to have to take another flight. And that can sometimes result in uncomfortable situations. So, no, I've never had to do this at all. Now, there have been times when I've had to delay a flight because of weight and balance issues. They had to put on sandbags. I think we talked about that on last episode, to kind of, add some weight to a forward cargo compartment to kind of make sure that we stay in the safe envelope during the flight, but never have had to ask people to get off the airplane. So thank you, Darren. Ken asks, he says, I was listening to episode 138 where you were mentioning non-revving to California on a 777, and you said something about almost not getting a seat because of the need for extra crew rest or something along those lines. That made me wonder if Acme has separate crew rest compartments on its long-haul aircraft, or if it just uses regular passenger seats. I've seen photos of some aircraft with separate crew rest bunks above or below the passenger deck. Have you ever flown one of those aircraft? No. What are these areas like? Also, if you're non-revving on an aircraft like this on a flight where these crew rest areas are not used, for example, a domestic leg on a 777, can you, as a non-rev passenger, use this space? That would seem to be an extra perk of non-revving. The 777 I do end up non-revving / jump seating on often, and they on some of the models of 777 that we have, they have a crew rest facility just above business class, and so you walk out of the cockpit and kind of where the bathrooms are near the forward of the first class area or business class area. There's a little door, looks like a door to a restroom, but it's actually a door that leads to like a semicircular staircase, a very steep one. It goes up, and there are 2 first-class seats, and then right behind each of those seats is a full, lay-flat bunk, and that is for those very, very long flights that 777, I think it's the ER, performs, and when you have 2 captains and 2 first officers, so 2 full flight crews on those flights. And because of where it's located and because there are special procedures involved in egressing from those crew rest facilities, you have to be, at least at Acme Airlines, you have to be qualified on the 777 to ride in that crew rest facility. So unfortunately for me, no, I don't get to take advantage of the crew rest facility up there. But what difference, or the reason why it was important for when I was jump seating out to LA, my last trip, is that there are 2 cockpit jump seats, and then there are 2 positions in that crew rest facility. And the airplane is certified to have that crew rest facility occupied during takeoffs and landings, as well as cruise flight. And there were 3 of us who had signed up for the jump seat. When I got to the airplane, maintenance was working on some kind of airflow issue to that crew rest facility, which is above business class. And because there was no air going up there, we weren't going to be able, or they weren't going to be able to use that facility. And that meant there were 3 of us with only 2 cockpit jump seats, and that meant that I was probably going to be the last man out because I was the last one to sign up for the seat. And luckily, the maintenance folks figured out how to get the airflow back up there. One of the 777 qualified pilots headed up to that crew rest facility and spent the whole flight up there, which left the 2 seats up front available for the other guy and me to jump seat. And it turns out at the very last minute, one of the flight attendants came up and said, hey, there's a seat back in economy comfort class that is available if you'd rather ride back there. And I thought, oh, yes, I would, because I have some podcast editing and some other work to do on my laptop, which I would not be able to do in the cockpit on the airplane heading out to California. So was a very got a lot of work done on that trip. So worked out well. All right. Thank you, Ken. Oh, and Ken says, P.S. I'm one of your listeners who listens to the podcasts at fast speeds. I find that I can listen to you at 2 times speed and follow along just fine. The only problem I have is when you play an ATC clip. Those are a bit hard to follow at double speed. So if you don't mind, could you please start playing ATC clips at 1/2 speed? I realize that this might be a bit irritating to those listening to your podcast at normal speed, but for those of us who are listening at the faster speeds, it will sound perfect. And then he put a little emoticon thing with a wink. He was just kidding. PPS, it would be great to have a New York City meetup one of these days. Yeah, it would. It definitely would. We'll have to do that, Ken. Please let me know if I can help in any way to make this possible. I certainly will, Ken. Thank you for that and for your feedback. And I hope that... Oh, the other thing I was going to say about the crew rest facility is that it really depends on the airplane. Some airplanes, like our 767 ERs, I think most of them, some of them might have crew rest, like separate crew rest facilities, but many of them just have an area or a blocked off business class seat that the crew will use for their crew rest or their breaks during the flight. And then on the 777, in addition to the pilot's crew rest facility up above business class in the front of the airplane, there's also a crew rest facility for the flight attendants in the back, again above the economy section in the back. And we have some airplanes, I think the Airbus 330s, that have crew rest facilities below deck in the cargo compartment. But it's a modular thing that they, has bunks and chairs and that kind of thing. I've never been in them, so I'm not sure exactly how good or how comfortable they are. But it really depends on the airplane. I think it depends on the model of the airplane. It depends on the airline and what they have agreed upon with the employee groups, et cetera. So all kinds of different things out there. It doesn't necessarily have to be a separate crew rest facility. It could be just a business class seat set aside for the crew members, etc. Let's see, how are we doing with time here? Over 2 hours again. No big surprise there. Well, I tell you what I'm going to do. I am going to stop at this point because I need to take a physiological break, if you know what I mean. So I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Okay, I'm back. Boy, that was a much needed break for my bladder, if you know what I mean. And it also allowed me to make a quick trip over to my refrigerator and grab a Sierra Nevada Torpedo Extra IPA. Very good. My throat was becoming parched. Okay, let's continue with some audio feedback from Travis.
Hi, my name's Travis, and as you can tell by my accent, I'm from Australia. I first discovered your podcast actually on my birthday in end of February, and managed to catch up on all 130 odd episodes in a matter of 4 months, listening to them at 2 times speed and while I work.
There, another 2 times speed
I've been fortunate
person.
enough to travel the world and take photos of vintage aircraft at various air shows, including Dayton, Paris, some in England and New Zealand, which has been an amazing experience. But my main love is commercial aircraft. That's how come I enjoy your show so much. On a recent trip to the US, I discovered how much different airline travel is in America compared to Australia. For example, my girlfriend and I were both booked on the same flight from New Orleans to Las Vegas. My girlfriend had recently had surgery and was unable to carry any weight over 10 kilos. As we arrived at the airport, I discovered that I did not have a seat and was forced after a lot of complaining to go via New York to Las Vegas from New Orleans. This ended up being a full day of my holiday wasted. Not to mention that my girlfriend, who could not carry anything, had to unload our bags and make her way to the hotel on her own. This could not happen in Australia, as airlines can only sell the amount of seats they actually have, and if someone doesn't show up, the airplane flies with an empty seat. Another thing that amazed me was the TSA officers. In New Orleans, they were rushing us through and decided that we did not have to have our laptops and other items checked. When I arrived in New York, I noticed the security there was pulling out all the laptops and everything else and checking them, even though I was inside the same airport. When a TSA officer was about to start work, they walked up to the counter, sort of showed their ID and walked straight through. In Australia, they would be forced to go through the metal detector like everyone else and have their bags and other items x-rayed. In Australia, even if no one was on duty, one officer would be forced to x-ray the other person's items and vice versa, and this would be done in front of a camera to ensure that there could be no inside jobs. I was amazed by this because out of the 100-odd thousand TSA officers there are in America, surely one could have been corrupted or bribed. I would really appreciate hearing your opinion on both of these matters and really enjoy your show and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis, for sending in the audio feedback. You know how much I love that, especially with different accents like yours from Australia. And yeah, I didn't realize that you're not allowed to overbook a flight in your country. That would be kind of cool, wouldn't it? Wouldn't have to worry about that hassle traveling here in the United States if we had the same rule. Although airline executives would not like that at all because they count on a certain number based on historical data, not hysterical data, but historical data of a certain percentage of people not showing up for a certain flight during a certain time of year. And so they, armed with that knowledge, they say, you know what, we can, I think, safely, based again on historical data, oversell the flight. But let's say the airplane has 150 seats and we can oversell or sell 160 seats, because we know that there's a really good chance that, at least 10 people are not going to show up. And that way we can kind of guarantee that every seat will be full with a paying passenger. And the problem is that, how statistics are, they don't always work out. And, there's always that chance where you sold 160 seats and they only have 150 seats on the airplane and 10 people are not going to be happy. Well, it turns out that Travis was one of those people. And I'm sorry that happened to you, Travis. It's always a bummer. Sounds like you didn't get treated very well. And I certainly hope it wasn't Acme. And if it was, my personal apology to you for having to experience that. Now, the question about the different kind of experience you have going through security and working with TSA, I think, as far as, taking the laptops out and everything, it could have been that where you went through security where you didn't have to pull anything out, it may have been the TSA pre-line, the pre-approved line. Sometimes, even if you're not officially in that program, they'll send or divert some of the traffic into that line. And if you happen to have lucked out and you're in the TSA pre-line, you don't have to take your computer out of your bag and do all that take your shoes off, take your belt off, all that kind of stuff. That's one of the nice things about being an airline crew member. If the place that you're going through security does not have known crew member, which is just the bee's knees, it's the best because they have a system where you go through and you show them your passport or some other kind of government ID and your airline ID. And there's a database where your picture and all your information is there. And if it all matches up, then they just let you walk right through and you don't have to put your bag through a machine and none of that. And it's very, we're all very well vetted. But in those airport locations where they don't have known crew member, sometimes they'll let the employees go through a TSA pre-line, which means that we don't have to take our computer out. I travel with a darn audio recording studio, and that can be quite a hassle sometimes for me. But it's worth it because it's for you. It's just for you. So I'm suspecting that may have been what happened to you in your experience. If it was not a TSA pre-line and they did not require you to take your computer and do all that kind of stuff, I'm not sure what happened there. It doesn't sound right to me. And as far as TSA agents going through security themselves, I'm not sure. That may vary from security or airport location to airport location, because I have seen TSA agents going through the scanners and putting their stuff through the machines. And then I think I've also witnessed the same thing you did, where they just kind of flashed their badge and kind of avoided security. So I don't know what is correct, and or if it was it was correct based on that location or local procedures. I'm not sure how that all works, but perhaps somebody listening who works for the TSA or has TSA knowledge can elaborate on that. But that's what I'm guessing there, Travis. So I hope I answered both of your questions. And again, thank you for listening, and thank you for sending in the feedback. I do appreciate it. Christine writes, I was wondering if you had any thoughts about how to become an airline pilot. And she says, just kidding. I actually just decided to write you with a bit of airline humor. A military pilot called for a priority landing because a single-engine jet fighter was running a bit peaked. Air traffic control told the fighter pilot that he was number 2 behind a B-52 that had one engine shut down. Then comes back the fighter pilot on the radio. The dreaded 7-engine approach. Hope that makes your fans smile. Cheers from the LaGuardia approach lights. You live in the approach light system at LaGuardia? That doesn't sound right. Thank you, Christine. For those of you who don't know, the B-52 has 8 engines. So an engine out approach is probably not that big of a deal on that airplane. If the engine out is your only engine, then it's a much bigger deal, I would say. Thanks again, Christine. Stephen Marciano writes, never mind. I forget that. I just realized, and see, Stephen's smart. He starts the email with, I would prefer you not read this on your show. So I didn't. I almost did. So thank you, Steve, for the message. And if I haven't already answered it, I will soon. Nick writes, good day to you, Captain Jeff. My name is Nick, and I'm a relatively new viewer to your show. I just started my flight training about a month and a half ago, and I'm excited to be soloing soon. I've been listening to your show while driving to my local flight school college, and I have to say, I love it. You don't have to say that, but thank you. I really enjoy hearing about all the trips you do and the interesting topics you have to talk about, as well as the awesome feedback from your viewers. Did you hear that, viewers? Awesome feedback from your viewers and listeners. I have to say, I was a little disappointed when I started learning to fly. Because I felt that there was less time to see the view, which is easily my favorite part of flying. Now, I would imagine this is because there is so much to learn and remember when flying. I still love every second in the air and could not think of a better career. I have to ask you, does stress from factors such as bad weather, delays, and the fact that this is your job take away from the wonderful experience of flying? I'm hoping my slight disappointment is just because of my lack of experience. Nevertheless, I am still looking forward to my future in aviation. Once again, I love the show and look forward to the next one. Blue skies, Nick. Well, Nick, when you start out learning how to fly, as you said, there are so many things that you're having to pay attention to learn, to concentrate upon. And you know what? You just can't sit there as you would as a passenger and just look out the window at all the great sights. And there's a pressure and stress and all that definitely, takes away from the joyous experience of flight, for sure. But I want to tell you that the more you learn and the more experience you have flying the airplane, the better it's going to get, and the more time you're going to be able to go back to those days where you just looked out the window and really took it all in. But again, also with anything, any job, any experience, the more you experience it, the more you take it for granted, and the more you don't realize what a beautiful and wonderful thing it is that you're doing. And I've known many airline pilots, and I know fellow airline pilots out there and corporate pilots and military pilots could probably say the same. They've met people that, just got to the point where they weren't happy in this field of work and were always miserable because they thought that doing something else would be better than what they're, the grass is greener kind of syndrome. And so many times I've wanted to, take those people, somehow magically extract them from the cockpit, put them in a coal mine or a shipbuilding company or some kind of really, really difficult job, or even a cubicle somewhere in a job that you just are miserable doing, and then take them back after experiencing that for a little while and put them back into the cockpit and say, now, do you feel any differently about, your experience or your job now? Sadly, I would imagine that many of those probably would feel the same. And as I've mentioned before many times, the people that seem to be miserable doing the job that I love to do, and so many people listening love, are the people that are miserable in every aspect of their life. Their marriages, their relationship with their kids, their relationship with their neighbors. Every aspect of their life is misery and miserable. And that's just a certain subset of people, a minority, I hope, of people out there in the world that are just happy being miserable. And so I kind of got off track there. Sorry, Nick. But I think that as long as you have that enthusiasm, that passion of flying, that once you start getting more experience, you'll start being more comfortable with starting to look outside again and really enjoy the thing. And I have no doubt that that's going to happen with you. So I wouldn't be disappointed. I know you feel a little bit of disappointment right now, but don't worry. I think that if you really, truly have a passion for flying, it'll come back and you'll have the opportunity to enjoy it again, just like that first time that you got in an airplane and felt the forces of flight on your body and you looked outside and went, wow, this is amazing. Thank you for your feedback. Let's see. I think it's getting to be about time. I'm getting a message on my video device that the battery is almost gone. And I made it through a good deal of feedback here. Not everybody's, of course. I never do. Well, maybe one time or two I have. But sadly, looks like I'm going to have to stop right now. But don't worry. Let's see. Dan and Kent and Ken and Rick and Jacob, corporate pilot Dave, Dylan, Tom, Trent, another Nick, etc. All of you out there. Don't worry. I'll answer your feedback on the next episode 141. So, as we wind down this show and we hear the music coming up in the background, I'm assuming, I don't hear it yet, we recommend to you that you go over to airlinepilotguy.com, check out all the show notes and all those great links that the listeners sent in for you to view and such. Again, airlinepilotguy.com/140 should do it. I've set it up correctly. Otherwise, just go to airlinepilotguy.com. If you want to follow me on Facebook, if you're a Facebooker, I'm Airline Pilot Guy there. Twitter, Airline Pilot Guy. If you want to get tweets from my trips and where I am, you can head over to Where is Captain Jeff, WhereisCaptJeff. Let's see, what else? Sending feedback, it's all the information about that is on the site. But you can send it directly to feedback@airlinepilotguy.com. If you want to send in audio feedback, use that smartphone, the tablet device, whatever, and just attach that audio to your email and send it to feedback@airlinepilotguy.com. There are other options for feedback as well, SpeakPipe, etc. You can find all that information on airlinepilotguy.com. And finally, let's see, next week, I'll be flying all week long. Hopefully I'll find one day in there to, or maybe more than one day to record next episode 141. But I have a 3-day trip and then 2-day trip. So I'm out Monday, home on Wednesday night, and then back out Thursday and Friday. So until next time, wishing you clear skies, unlimited visibility, and tailwinds. Take care and God bless.
Good day.